Like standing from the top. Oh yeah, let's
Hello people on the internet, my name is Sarah, or as I'm known on the internet as Sketchbook Sarah, and today I'm going to be walking you through my thought process as well as my art process and my painting process while I was making this painting called Grown Woman. And I started talking through sort of like my different inspirations and research going into this because the more I work, and especially with my self-portraiture, I like to get more and more like academic and researchy. So this is just sort of me talking about my different inspirations and different things I've been thinking about while I was making this. It's probably going to end up more like a podcasty video essay type video. Also, look at how oil painted my hands are. Isn't that fun? But so if you want to put that on in the background while you work like I like to do when I paint, you go ahead, feel free. I'm just going to talk you through my painting process as well as my meaning behind this.
I have had this painting idea floating around in my mind since last year. In fact, I did take some reference photos of it on a camping trip last year, but I've always liked this idea of like showing connection to the earth and like to Mother Nature and to like women through braiding my hair into wildflowers growing out of the ground. Because to me, braiding really just connects like the symbol of women and femininity like across time and across cultures. Like I learned how to braid from my mom. My mom learned how to braid through her grandma, etc., etc. Braiding has been a huge part of a lot of different cultures, and I have just sort of identified with braiding as like a personal thing. Like I wear that hairstyle a lot of the double braids, so I thought it was a really pertinent symbol. And then I heard of this title of this book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and I thought that was interesting. And while I was reading it, I remembered this visual that I've had floating in my mind for years, and that's usually how a lot of my paintings work, is that I find my best work tends to happen when I'm like sort of chewing on an idea for a while, and since I'm always coming up with new painting ideas, I find that a lot of the paintings that I have been wanting to make are ones that I've sort of had cycling in the back of my mind until it's sort of the right time for me to bring them to life, and I sort of work around the same themes a lot, so it's not like I'm, doing something completely different from one painting to the next. They all sort of live in the same universe, and they all sort of are in conversation and respond to each other. But, I have been thinking about this idea, and then after I read the book Braiding Sweetgrass, I just knew I had to make it, and there's like a lot about in that book that I will get into later. But my main idea about this painting was to just do a homage to all of the women in my lineage, as well as all the women who came before me, and especially like female artists. I always say, all of my art sort of stands on the shoulders of the women and the female artists that came before me, so I wanted to pay homage to them, as well as my art is always personal, so I wanted to pay homage to my family members, and the way I did this was in very specific symbolism that sort of speaks to like a general aesthetic and culture of kitsch and girlhood. So first I'll talk about like the sort of specifics that are around me and my family, and then I'll get into like the broader societal context. But the reason that I put various symbols in here, for example, I put in a flower, the columbine near my hair for myself because that's sort of my self-identifier symbol, and then I have the hummingbird for my grandmother. Both of my grandmas I associate very heavily with hummingbirds. They both like are very into like feeding them and knowing about them, and I just sort of, whenever I think about hummingbird, I think of both of my grandmas. And with the braiding of my hair, I wanted my hair to sort of be pink as it met the earth because I had pink hair when I was painting this at the time, but I also sort of like always was inspired by this blonde pink combo that I had from like watching Barbie movies growing up. And with like the hair and like the clips and the bows and the sequins, I was really thinking about childhood and sort of like the early 2000s. Like I wanted to sort of speak to like my generation. And whenever I'm making art, I feel like specificity, oh my gosh, is always sort of the way to go with me. And I feel like it's sort of, I'm going to be a Swiftie. Lord forgive me, I'm going to be a Swiftie just for like 10 minutes in this video. It's relevant, I swear. But the thing that people find really interesting about Taylor Swift's music is that I think her most successful songwriting is when she talks about very big emotions through very specific moments and vignettes in time, and I sort of like to do the same thing in my art. And speaking of Taylor Swift, I One of the things I have on here is a friendship bracelet that my sister made for the Eras tour. And my sister is a wonderful STEM person. She's extremely smart at math and science, but she cannot write essays or spell to save her life. And when I tasked her at making the Eras tour bracelets with me, one of our favorite songs is Gorgeous, because we love the rep era, and she made a gorgeous bracelet that she spelled Gorgus, and we thought it was really funny. So now whenever we think something is pretty, we say it's gorgeous to each other. That's just some like inside joke, and I knew I kind of wanted to include a little nod to the Eras tour. I feel like I could not make this painting without at least touching on my Swiftyism. Okay, forgive me. I don't know, just being like into Taylor Swift has sort of just been a big part of my girlhood and my growing up, and I feel like the Eras tour was such a big culmination of like a lot of people who had similar childhoods and beliefs and stuff all coming together. And my sister and I both grew up on Taylor Swift, and we had never been to a concert together because my sister had never been to a concert, and I went to the 1989 world tour. So I was like, we can go to the Eras tour together, and we happened to like get tickets the first round, and it was just really magical, and I felt very connected to my younger self, because the reason I am such a big Swiftie to this day is that I grew up on Taylor Swift. She was sort of like the first artist that I really connected with. I mean, I think that's like, it's pretty obvious. I feel like when you look at me, my top artist every year on Spotify is Taylor Swift.
Not gonna lie, we're in the ugly stage right now, but it's okay. We're gonna slowly work our way out of the ugly stage. Right now, it's just hard because this is like a weird angle of my face, and the lighting is low-key kind of complicated because it's like very subtle, and it's like very harsh transition from like purple to yellow, but in the gray tone. So I'm just really trying to layer a bunch of different grays until I achieve the effect where it doesn't look weird. But, you know, we can just chillax and paint in the rain until this painting starts to look the way it's supposed to. You know what I mean? Kind of all my paintings, I feel like, really do go through this kind of dramatic transformation where I just really think that they're pretty ugly until I can get them to like a state where I like them. And it's so funny because I paint in public sometimes, and a lot of people come up to me and like, it's always during the ugly stage, I swear to God. Like, I will be painting something and it'll look just crazy because I kind of like the look of like layered mistakes. I think it looks kind of better if I make more mistakes and then I have to cover them up. I feel like that's how a lot of happy accidents happen. But like when I'm doing that, I'm like, go away, come back when it looks good. But you know, they always think it's amazing, so that's nice. Most people, they always say they can't draw stick figures, so if you're always scared to draw in public, just know 9 times out of 10 everyone who comes up to you says, I can't even draw a stick figure. So the bar is not very high. Even so, what happened to trying things even if you're bad at them? You know, whatever happened to that? It's okay to be bad at stuff, you know. You don't have to be great at everything you do. Having fun is the purpose in life. People forget that. Okay, we're getting somewhere. I'm really trying to focus on the planes of the face. Painting like a sculptor is how I think about it. I learned this technique from studying J.C. Leyendeckers' art. I think he's really great at this. I'm not great at this right now, but other people are.
The reason that I included that, and as well as like the sunflower and like the butterfly, was also from my grandma. And it's because I wanted to just be very specific, and with all the flowers that I chose, tulips for my mother, that's very important, as well as a pansy for my mother. I very much associate flowers with my mom. She did a lot of like gardening when I was growing up, and I just wanted to include a lot of other minor things. So some more general symbols that I included in this is some of my favorites that other people have picked up on. Just to speaking to that sort of general 2000s aesthetic, I love the like little spiky gel earring that I paint on much later. I don't know if you ever wore those like when you were in the 2000s, but like I love them. I have this necklace that I'm wearing that's a heart shape with my dog in it. You might see it at the beginning of this video. It's actually a painting I made, and then I had it printed onto a necklace, so I had to include my dog. I've only had female like pets and animals growing up, so it's just funny that like even the women of my family, like even the dogs are women. I grew up in like just an extremely female dominated family. My dad is kind of estranged from both my mom's family, obviously, and then my his family a bit too, and just all sides of my family are kind of just run by women, and women have the say, and women are the majority, so it's kind of cool. I feel like a lot of people kind of grow up with like these kind of like terrible situations where their moms are like boy moms and they're like obsessed with their sons, and then they like berate their daughters, or they like try to like censor their daughters or like hold their daughters back. This painting is also about sisterhood. So like I have candy necklaces, and then one of them is a rosary from my grandma who was deeply Catholic. And I also just have like candy necklaces because they just remind me of like sweetness and girlhood and sugar and spice and all things nice. That's the deal with like the ring pop. And there's like another ring on my finger that you'll see later on that is a painted version of the ring that I made in Italy, which is the Venus of Willendorf, who is like the first representation of female art and art history. And it's kind of cool. Some people think it's like a self-portrait. Some people think it's like essentially like a jerk-off object, but I like the interpretation that it's a representation of a woman looking down at herself, and I think that's really cool. I like that interpretation a lot better. It's like the first representation of women in art, and I made my own version of it in Italy, and I wear it as a ring every day now, and I just wanted to include that as like a little memento to art history. As well as, like, I put the snail in there because, oh my god, this painting was so slow and it took forever. And I just put in the little beetle because the green one is just because I see those little green beetles all the time. The ladybug is for the film Lady Bird because I just freaking love that movie. But, you know, these are just, like, little things that I was thinking about while I'm putting them in there. But, you know, these aren't, like, hard and fast symbols. They're just sort of different mementos from my life that have shaped me and made me who I am today. One of the symbols in the background that you'll notice there that's standing like kind of taller than everything is the corns, beans, and squash three sisters that I have planted in the background. And of course I have like braiding sweetgrass. I have the title represented in the main image of this piece where I'm literally braiding grass into my hair. But in general, I wanted to also like sort of more directly point to that book and all the teachings that it talks about. And one of the chapters I really liked most was how it talked about the positive relationship between nature, gardening, and like women and mother and daughter. She talks about this passage about how her daughter and her both bond over their love of gardening and how gardening is a form of love and loving the earth, and the earth loves us back. And it just talks about this beautiful reciprocity culture and gift culture that Native American philosophy focuses on. And of course, I thought it would be super fitting to include the three sisters in a painting about sisterhood and community and lineage. While painting, I also read the book A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, which is about the societal and economic conditions necessary for women to make great art and how women are often barred from these and how that can change the results of the art that is made by women in the first place. It was a really interesting read. I would like to read more books by Virginia Woolf. This was my first book by her, and it's a really short read. I recommend just picking it up. You can finish it in a day. In the book, Woolf discusses criticism often hurled at the book Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which I found really interesting. It's criticized as this like fluffy novel about upper middle class British society, and it's frivolous, which is funny how it mirrors some of the criticism it gets today. There's this tweet that says, you know, Pride and Prejudice is just a bunch of people talking and going over to each other's houses. And to frame it like that is true, but it demeans what Pride and Prejudice is. So it is essentially like a novel about economic relationships. A war is a factor of it. There's a backdrop of English society and what we can glean from upper English society and the roles of women. You know, there's a lot to be mined here, but, you know, Jane Austen is in a women's role, and women write in sitting rooms if they're lucky. And of course, you're going to have a sitting room novel when you are confined to the sitting room. You know, men are allowed to go out and experience things and live life and have these great adventures and these neutral experiences from neutral points of view. But women don't have this inherent neutrality that men do. And the way I want to express sort of my own version of the criticism against women is that I am a visual person, so I wanted to tell this visually. And the way I was thinking about doing this is that my life is dictated by this unserious, kitschy, frilly, feminine aesthetic that I have been sort of like bathed in my whole life. And I personally am a very feminine person, so I've always liked it and I've always been attracted to it. But femininity and flamboyancy is punished, both in men particularly, but also in women, strangely enough. You know, society expects you to be feminine, but if you're almost enjoy it, if it's flamboyant, if it's rebellious if it's sure of itself. That's also a problem. And so it's sort of this damned if you do, damned if you don't. Femininity is really strange that way, where I feel like masculinity is very much like you need to be a man or else. Femininity is like, you need to be a woman. Oh, you're doing it wrong. No, you're doing it wrong. Still doing it wrong. That way is also wrong. Like, there's no correct way to do femininity, whereas masculinity, to me, as someone who's not masculine, really, and is not a man, seems to be much more straightforward. So I sort of like the idea of this reclamation use of the feminine aesthetic, because, when you use this aesthetic to talk about more serious topics, I feel like it can really open this door of reclamation. It's not irony, because honestly this is just who I am. Like, it's not ironic. I genuinely like glitter and sparkles and pink and glitter, and I already said glitter, and hair clips and flowers and my mother and the smell of cupcakes and the taste of sugar. Like, I like good things in life, and just because you talk about these sort of issues, it doesn't mean it's less pertinent than issues that are more masculine, like war or trauma or things like that. They're sort of equal, and the devaluing and the focusing on one thing is just sort of shows our societal values more than it does this objective truth that I feel like it's been framed as. I feel like girlhood has really had a big moment on the internet as a buzzword in the last couple of years in all sorts of different forms, and I'd like to talk about the evolution of it, as well as my opinions on, like, the different uses of it. I feel like there's been so much discourse about this. But I really did enjoy, like, the Eras tour and sort of, like, the Barbie summer, and I really did enjoy, like, the community that really had, where I loved how people were dressing up and going to the movies. There is, like, this sort of layer of consumerism in femininity and in girlhood, and that's also sort of an interesting intersection of it with, like, capitalism. So I did, like, there are some, like, more capitalistic things, I guess, in this painting, like, like there are, like, man-made objects and stuff, but I did mainly stick to, like, natural things. Like, I didn't want to, like, I feel like a lot of people frame girlhood as, like, the things you buy, whereas I'm much more about, like, the things you make and the people who you surround yourself with. So, there is an element of that, but I really don't like the way, like, society has been framing, like, girlness as, like, stupidity, and, like, there is this nice return to innocence and naivete and whatever, but, the, like, girl dinner and girl math stuff, like, I have seen some of that really to just, like, demean women and, like, call us, like, stupid, and, like, sort of, like, in a trad wife way, where I feel like a lot of modern patriarchy is really about, like, stupidification of yourself. Like, you have to, like, dumb yourself down for men. It's very strange. Like, it's, like, not, I don't know, it's, instead of, like, it used to be like, oh, I'm not like other girls, now it's more like, no, like, become the blank clone for your husband. Like, I don't know, it's very strange. Like, it's like, oh, don't think, like, just be, like, this, like, whole, like, sparkle stuff, I feel like, is very regressive, and, like, the trad wife aspiration, and, like, the stay-at-home girlfriend. Like, women aren't really wanted to be thinking and speaking as much anymore. I feel like it used to be very much about girl power and empowerment, and I feel like less and less that is becoming the cultural norm, and it's more about conformity. And I think this is really interesting in tandem with, like, the rise of eating disorders. Maybe it's just because this is something that I have experienced recently firsthand, but the thing with the rise of, like, skinny talk and whatever, I feel like this is sort of the newest evolution of this, and, like, the whole thin is back thing. Like, I don't, like, there is a reason why, like, they want you to not be eating enough, and it's because when you're not eating enough, you can't think, and you're too weak to organize, and I think that's a really real part of control. And, like, there's this thing that Daniela Young writes about in her book Uncultish, where she talks about, like, the need for, like, the skinny, like, blonde woman leader of cults. Like, this is very much a thing. There's a reason why starvation is a torture tactic. But anyway, that's a little bit off the deep end. Pulling it back to this painting a bit more closely, the thinking behind this is more of, like, this sort of, like, progressive, like, hopeful narrative. I feel like that was more present, like, when I was a kid growing up in the Obama administration. I feel like things have definitely changed post Voldemort, and I talk about that a lot in all my videos, but it's just very true. Like, I wanted really to have this painting be time specific and sort of, like, cultural specific to the 2020s, where we are sort of in this, like this era of like new aesthetics. You know, I think that the dyed hair is very specific to a modern age. Like the ring pop places it in a very specific moment in time, as well as like the Claire's earrings. And like aesthetically it's like 2000s inspired, but it's not quite 2000. This is just sort of like the overall cultural narrative that's like spinning in the background when I'm making this. One interpretation that my friend gave me, because I always ask all of my art friends for feedback when I'm making these pieces, because you know, when you're working on something like this for so long, you can kind of get your head in the sand and like lose sight of the end goal. But when I asked people like for their interpretations, because I always want to make sure that my symbols are reading clearly and concisely, and I asked her for her interpretation, and what she said was that she thought of it as like an allegory for the Garden of Eden, and like the story in that is like, you know, Eve is in the garden and she is, you know, she's running out of time because she's only in there for so long, but you know, while you're in it, it's paradise. So she compared that to like childhood and growing up, and you know, I'm like, you know, enjoying like the splendors of my youth, but you know, there's storms on the horizon. You know, the Garden of Eden will end. And I was inspired by Eve because, you know, she's like the first woman, and I just like that visual. But I really like this interpretation too. I feel like it's almost equally as true, even if that isn't my like complete sole original intention. That sort of is another factor of it, is that girlhood doesn't really like die the way boyhood does with men. Like I feel like men definitely become men, whereas women are, as societal, I don't know why I keep saying societal, I'm literally the Joker. Women are just much more infantilized in society, so girlhood is much more of a blurred line, and where it starts and where it ends is much different. But beyond that, I feel like it's also just such a special time in your life that like women just cherish more than men do. Maybe that has something to do with like the expectation of child rearing, whereas we're just more fixated on our own childhoods. I don't know. But in general, I just feel like women just really cherish each other, and it is through this like place of love and care that sort of stems from a childlike wonder and fixation of the world. But yep, that's my overall thinking and my reflection. Let me know if you've had a similar experience. You know, I was a very girly kid, but I feel like my more tomboyish traits were always very much rewarded. I do think it's funny online when like people assume I'm a man. Even when I paint stuff like this, I'm like, you really think a man would paint this? Like, that's crazy. But, you know, I feel like people assume I'm a man because I'm good at what I do. I feel like that's kind of the only explanation for it. Because I'm like, I paint stuff like this and people still ask if a man made it. And I'm like, you're joking. You have to be. Like, that's crazy. You know, and when I was like a little girl and I would be more boyish at times, like, I feel like that would be rewarded by like other boys. Like I did have some boys who would like, you know, praise me for like wanting to like wrestle and play video games and be like them, and they're like dumb, they're like 7-year-olds, so obviously they're just gonna say whatever dumb things that come to their mind. But you know, kids are like society, you know, they don't come up with stuff on their own, they just absorb what they hear. I also read Judith Butler and their sort of interpretations on gender as a performance, and I found those ideas really interesting. These ideas obviously are very controversial, and it depends on who you talk to, but you know, I really like the idea, and I do agree with the idea to an extent, that gender for sure is a performance. It is this sort of change and putting on of costume, especially for femininity, whereas masculinity really is sort of more of this natural state. You know, rugged men are like hairy and they're, you know, dirty and they rip open steak with their teeth, whereas like women are like feminine and frilly and pretty and delicate and fragile and must be protected and clean. And this aesthetic is something you put on. You put on makeup, you put on glitter, you put on things that are very spectacle oriented, because women, you know, have this long history of being spectacle, of being objects, of being property. But that's all changing now.
Right now I'm touching up the skin, and I'm really just trying to use all of my color theory knowledge as much as possible. And believe it or not, a lot of this highlight I'm actually mixing up like a really light lime green, because it's the opposite color. And because of that, when it blends in, it creates this like really nice gray. But because it's contrasted with all these warmer hues, it makes it look a lot more blue and cooler than it actually is. And I'm saving like these really punchy like purple highlights for these like deep shadows, because that's just sort of how it is in my reference photo. And I feel like, you know, if I made it too purple, I feel like I end up looking kind of Barney like skin is really hard, because, you know, my skin is like a light tan and the lighting is like purple, and the other lighting is yellow. So there's like this weird interplay because skin really does absorb a lot of the color around it. But yeah, right now it's hard because what I'm dealing with is mostly like really subtle variations in like pretty gray and beige colors, but it looks so bright on the canvas because it's just juxtaposed to a bunch of other like brighter colors or colors of opposite value. So when they're put together, they look kind of crazy against each other. But the nice thing about oil paint is that you can put on kind of a crazy color and marry it to the color underneath it, and it'll all just sort of blend harmoniously. Versus like acrylic, you kind of have to like be a bit more choosy about what you put on top because, you know, like you can't blend it as well. I mean, you still can do this technique. I definitely do it. But like with oil paint, you can do these washes of color. So I feel like you can just build up a more interesting color profile so much more easily with oil paint. That's sort of the reason why I enjoy it, is because you can really get some very subtle hue variations with oil paint and blend them together just so beautifully and seamlessly. Whereas in acrylic, you can do the same thing, but I kind of have to adjust. So like if I want to do this really nice blended style, I either have to take a lot more time, or what I do is I just sort of incorporate the lack of blending into the style, and I'll do like more, like all my geometric style pieces, I definitely opt to do that in acrylic because it's just easier to do in acrylic because you can like measure things, versus like smooth and blendy style things like this are just better suited for oil painting. I think it's really important when like choosing your medium to just keep in mind what final look you want for the piece. Like if you want like something really graphic, like don't choose, you know, colored pencil or whatever, maybe choose like gouache. So just choosing your medium and knowing how to work with it is a really big part of like just getting better at painting in general. Because I feel like the reason why a lot of people struggle with painting is because they just don't know their tools very well. Oh my god, like I watch, like granted if you're an artist, I feel like you probably have a bit better of a grasp on how to do this, but like watching non-artists like paint for the first time is kind of baffling to me. Because, you know, for me it's just so intuitive, like, you know, oh, it's kind of thin, it needs more water, oh, it's too thick, because, you know, I've just been using it for forever and it's just so intuitive to me. But like my sister will paint and she'll like glob it on and she's like, why is it so thick? And I'm like, because you need to thin it out. She's like, oh, and then she'll thin it out. She's like, now it's watery, what do I do now? And I'm like, add more paint, that's what you do. So you know, it is different for everyone. I feel like, you know, some people are just much more better at drawing and that comes much more naturally to them. Other people, painting comes naturally to them. I don't know, painting does and doesn't come naturally to me. Like I learned how to paint before I learned how to draw, but I learned on watercolor, and I feel like watercolor is just such a different medium than kind of anything else. It kind of almost doesn't count. Like it is painting for sure, but like it's so much different than painting with acrylic or oil. But then I got into doing acrylic and oil painting when I was probably in middle school. I started watching like a bunch of oil painters on YouTube that I really liked their stuff. So I went out and I got some oil paint, and I probably gave myself terpenoid or whatever exposure. And you know, it is unsafe. It's okay though. I figure like I see all the people in southern Italy like chain smoking and like eating nothing but like croissants for breakfast every day, and they live to like 105. So I'm probably fine. They oil paint a crap ton down there. They do look old. I will say, everyone in Italy like lives like they definitely live to older, but like the teenagers look so much older, and I think it is because of the chain smoking and probably being out in the sun all day. I'm definitely looking kind of greenish now, so I'm trying to like bring it back with a bit more of like a pinky highlight color now. It's all about the interplay of color, you know, like I really like some like weird skin tone moments. I think that those can be really beautiful because skin can really absorb light in just a bunch of different strange ways, like I keep saying. But, you know, when it gets too weird, you're like, this doesn't look realistic. Like I want that beautiful, like kind of opalescent look where like, you know, the sun is setting and you're like just out and like your skin is just absorbing all the pretty colors from the sunset because it's, you know, pink and purple all around you. And, you know, it's golden hour. So that's my goal with this. But this hand is looking kind of Frankensteinish. Because there is, like, green is, like, surprisingly a helpful color in a purple color scheme. Because whenever I want to use, like, a warm highlight on a purple, you can't do any other color but green. Green is really the only thing that will look correct. Like, these clouds are all, like, green shaded and blue shaded. Because, like, you can't put yellow on top of it. It's just too much. You can, but you need to have like some more transition colors. So but yeah, that's my advice, is just really pay attention to hue variation. The way I like learned how to get better at color is just, I don't know, I've always kind of had good color naturally instincts, but sort of just for me, like following your instincts is a good advice, because even if you end up picking crappy colors, as long as you get your values right, you can kind of make it work. And like for me, when I'm choosing colors, I just really think about what kind of mood I would want it to be, and like what like is the story I'm trying to tell. Like I'm always trying to be very like cinematic, and I'm really always trying to make it look very like kind of like dreamlike and kind of perfect. Like I like the idea, like a painting is beautiful on purpose. Like that's the whole reason you paint, is to make something like beautiful. So why would I not have like this picture perfect clouds and pink and swirls and rainbows and stuff, you know what I mean? But that's my style. Maybe you like to paint like much more minimalist stuff, you know? It's really just about like finding what works for you and what best communicates like what you want to communicate is really my best advice with color. And doing a lot of studying from life is a really great way to get better at it. For me, like the mental tricks I use is when I'm painting, I like to compare it to the color next to it. So I'm not necessarily trying to make the absolute color as I see it. I do that like to get a vague idea, but really I'm trying to judge it based on the color next to it. So like, for example, there's this area right here that's like so much bluer than everything else. So instead of laying down this like gray that it actually is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down like a more saturated blue, and then I'm just going to blend it in, because like the way that the oil paint is, it's just going to look better if I kind of go for a more punchy start and then just let it sink down into the colors below it. Using things like a limited palette can help you if you're struggling with colors. Like personally, I have a pretty good command on color, so I feel very comfortable doing these like very complicated rainbow design style paintings. But for a long time I would work in like very limited color palettes where I would very purposefully only use a few colors. But now I kind of try to push myself to add as many colors as I can and still keep the piece looking harmonious, because I just really love that aesthetic. Like, to me, I love the idea of like I'm Lisa Frank if Lisa Frank was a fine artist, you know? I got that comment the other day and I'm like, that's exactly what I'm going for. But like I mentioned, really the thing you want to pay the most attention to is value, because value is what is going to get you like 80% of the way there when it comes to your painting, and color is just sort of the tone of whatever like base you set and bones you set with your value. Because if the value is wrong, your whole painting is going to be wrong. But if your color is off but the value is right, it can look kind of interesting, you know? Like, color is so subjective that there isn't these hard and fast rules like there kind of is with value. Value does kind of need to make sense, at least, or it needs to follow its own rules. That's another thing is about a painting, is like when I say like it needs to make sense, it doesn't necessarily need to be like technically perfect. It just needs to make sense within its own universe. Like, you know, art style is still a factor when it comes to these kinds of things. I know there's the meme of like, oh, I'm not bad at painting, this is just my art style. But like, you know, sometimes if you don't take that and like take it all the way, but if you can lean into things that like aren't your strong suit but somehow make them work, it can result in really interesting ways. And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that art style is really, to me, more characterized it is what you're good at, but I think it's more strongly characterized by what you're bad at, and like how you fix what you're bad at and still paint what you want to paint anyway. Here is the big reveal, how she came out. So unfortunately, like because of the way that iPhone cameras work, especially with like the color purple, this painting looks like really dull and like dark on camera, but it looks like pretty vibrant in real life, so it's kind of frustrating. I will put up like insert pictures on the screen of like what it looks like in real life. And I've had this problem with my other self-portrait that I did, and the problem is that oil paint, like, it can photograph, but it's like it's dark, and right now it's wet, so it's like shiny, and it will like reflect a lot of light back. And oil paint is this beautiful rich medium that can like really absorb a lot of beautiful color and stuff, but on camera it just does not show up. And like I'd rather have like a beautiful painting in person than one that looks better for the iPhone screen, because I thought about making it lighter and like sort of compromising my vision just a little bit, just in service of making it look better on camera, because it's so hard to film and I'm so proud of it. But I've just decided not to, like, it just won't look good in videos. And I'll put up just pictures that I took that are more accurate to how it looks in real life. But I have this problem often with oil paint and darker acrylic painting, sort of just any like sort of dark cool tone painting in general. Like the light just really does not capture how vibrant it is and like how light it is, especially on the face. It's really strange. But like I said, that's just how oil painting goes and how it is with the internet. You'll know that if you ever go to an art museum and you'll look at like paintings in real life and you'll be like, oh my god, this painting is so much better in real life than it is ever captured on through the internet, through pixels. Then that's kind of universal. But anyway, I'm gonna get talking about what it was like to paint this real quick. I'm gonna talk mainly about the actual artistic process. Painting this was like very labor intensive and it kind of stressed me out, low-key. I don't know. And it's kind of funny because it's like a serene scene. Like it's very like, you know, it's peaceful and whatever. And I was like pretty stressed making it because I was just had like a stressful like last 2 weeks. And normally I work a lot faster and I really wanted this painting to be done with. And the fact that it just kept staring at me like unfinished for so long really bothered me. And the way I work is like I sort of work in layers. And the frustrating thing about it was that it did like everything was in place. I just needed to detail everything. And because everything was already there, like I had a hard time like concentrating on the specific details to make it more realistic. Like I don't know what was my problem. Like you can see this in the face. Like I repaint the face over and over and over, just trying to like redefine like the structure and the hue and the color of it. I'm pretty happy with it in the end. I feel like it reads how I want it to, and it actually looks like me, which is good because I kind of sometimes I make self-portraits and then the face does not look like you want the face at the very least to look good in a self-portrait. You know what I mean? Like what's the point of a self-portrait if your face doesn't look good? But yeah, I've been working on this thing kind of nonstop and it's just been a lot of detail work. Like this whole front area is just super high detail and I just really like the look of like super detailed, super considered, fleshed out work. I remember when I was younger, I went to the Celestial Seasonings tea factory tour of all places. And one of the things they have there is if you ever look at a Celestial Seasonings tea, they always have like a painting on the cover and they keep all these paintings in a gallery in their factory. And I remember I was looking at some of the paintings that they had commissioned and it was just astounding to me how every single square inch of the canvas had detail and was very highly considered. And a lot of my work I had made previously didn't think that way. Like I just sort of, I would do these portraits and I would have like simple or blank backgrounds. I just didn't realize like you could really go there and just decorate and detail every single square inch of a piece. So I found that really inspiring. I've sort of had that like idea ever since, and that's sort of grown more as I've looked at like things like hyper detailed Renaissance paintings. Like I just really find that sort of look inspiring in general. So that's sort of what I was going for here. It's just a super hyper detailed where like I like when a painting you can sort of look at any square inch and there's something there to pick apart and to dissect. And I like that about this piece. Like if you in the hair, there's stuff to look at in the hair, there's stuff to look at in the clouds and the rainbow, there's stuff to look at in this background area, and there's like a telephone wire hit. Like there's just a lot of hidden things. Like there's city lights and there's squash, and you know I have all of course these flowers and all these minor details, and I really like that push and play, especially between like hyper foreground and then background and how it all comes together. So I think technically this piece was definitely a success. For some reason, one of the things I struggled with most were painting this candy necklace. I don't know what it was. My brain could not wrap around how to paint this because there aren't really good reference photos, but I'm like, I don't need a reference photo. It's like a square ball. Like I should be able to paint that in whatever lighting, but I don't know why. I just could not paint from my mind as well, and that's sort of the main skill that I've had to like take on and learn as I've sort of had these more ambitious and mystical ideas in my head that you kind of can't get. I mean, I could build a direct reference photo for this piece, but it's just kind of impractical, and it's much better to just make it up from my head. And I've just sort of gotten better about making up and painting stuff from my head in all sorts of varieties. Like a lot of these flowers I made up from my head. Like I looked at reference photos, but they're like not reference one-on-one, that's for sure. And I did paint some of them from my head. Like I think all the daisies are from my head, and especially like these like leaves down here and stuff, that's all from my head. So painting from your head can be a really valuable skill. And I think yeah, the clouds are also all from my head. So especially when you paint something enough, and when you paint something from your head, it will have more of like a stylized look to it, and that's what I kind of wanted here. So like I said, very happy with everything. everything came out, even though it was a big freaking struggle, and I feel like everything is balanced. And when I put it online for feedback, I was really happy to know that everyone sort of picked up on all the stuff that I was putting down, and everyone noticed all of the very carefully and specifically picked symbols that I put in here, like the bleeding cut with the sparkly band-aid. I'm really happy that people liked that and like picked up on that and sort of my meaning with that, because this painting is about girlhood. And if you're a girl, you know, unfortunately that does come with a little bit of cuts and bleeding and misogyny and bullshit and, you know, people underestimating you and putting you down and stuff. Like, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. That's sort of my point. And then I also wanted to add in some like thorns and thorny plants down here for the same reason, because, you know, with the flowers, there are some prickly parts, there are some thorny bits. But beyond that, I wanted it to be like a very hopeful painting, but I didn't want you to forget about the pain altogether. And I don't know, I just feel like the tone reads really well. I'm always happy when people like sort of immediately get what I'm doing. Like when I'm working on this, I'm like, I am Lisa Frank, I am Lisa Frank. And then I put it on the internet, it's like, you are Lisa Frank. And I'm like, perfect, I am Lisa Frank.
Also, shout out to my former Native American film and media professor, Angela Bacca, who I emailed this to because this piece was partially inspired by a lot of the stuff we talked about in his class. I just really enjoyed him as a teacher, and I emailed it to him, and he said he would be showing this piece to his future classes in the fall. So that's really cool. I made it into the class slideshow.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. I would love to have a chit chat with you. I'm a very small channel, so I respond to all of them. Like this video, subscribe, ring the notification bell, go to my Instagram, go to my Etsy. There are prints of this. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do all the YouTuber stuff. I would be happy to have a conversation with you. Let me know. Okay, bye.